Tonight. I wanted to look over some classic ones. I was thinking the games by Blackburn were pretty interesting. He was a very high-level player in the late 1800s. I wanted to kind of look. I wanted to take a look at some of the more classical openings that got played. Here's one where he plays black and he plays the Benoni, and I thought that that would be kind of interesting to take a look at. So yeah, let's take a look. Let's flip it to be from black's perspective. And here we have white playing d4, black playing c5, and white playing c3. So, the important thing to think about is basically this is very old. This is a very old game. Opening theory is played very differently now than it was at that point. Now an overwhelming favorite here is d5, right? Basically the old Benoni defense. But here with this c3. This isn't really even, high up on this list. So e3, e4, which is the Smith-Morra, and then c3 is an old Benoni defense. On e3, e6, basically this defends this pawn on c5. And yeah, I mean, I guess, this is not, opening theory that I know a whole lot about, but at the same time, this e6 defending against d5, this is fairly interesting. This is a way that, black plays it in classical games. f4, again, these pawn structures look really fractured to me. Like f4 is a kind of a, I don't know. I mean, it's not a move that I would recognize here. Looks very different than the way that chess is played now. So e4 as opposed to f4 is the main line. But f4 is interesting, and it gives white the big center. I guess basically white figures that he can play e4 in a second. But black can seize e4 with d5. So with d5 here, I think that black's going to have pretty good control over the e4 square. And yeah, I guess here, what are the things that are going on? So pawns threatening, basically there's this tension on c5 and d4. There's no ability for white to play e4. But here, basically, I don't know. I guess what I would say is that basically f4 is an offbeat move. It shifts the eval pretty hard towards black. Basically, it doesn't seize the center, and the e4 square is definitely more relevant than the f4 square. So here, I guess I would just say e4 is probably the way to play this. But anyways, it's an interesting classic game, Preston Ware. But f4, knight to c6. Knight to f3, and black really seems to be avoiding playing on d5 here, which is kind of interesting. Just overall, these are very classic games. There's some imprecisions in the defense, especially when you look at these kind of romantic classic style games. But these are just interesting to look at. f5, e3, knight to f6, bishop to d3, and I'm still not getting why black's not playing d5, but at the same time. Okay, I guess the structures that involve d5 are less interesting or not as promising. But d5 seems to be objectively the best move for black in multiple situations here. Again, yeah, I don't get it. I mean, I think here e4 is now getting threatened directly. So yeah, the fact that black's just continues to allow e4 to be played is surprising to me. But anyways, this is an old Blackburn game. Basically against against Ware, and basically I wanted to take a look at mainline Benoni theory. I saw that this was a Benoni game, but I don't know. I guess the issue here is basically with that Benoni not getting played, or basically this is transposing into something that really doesn't look much like the Benoni at all. If f4 is just confusing, and black's inability to play d5 is also confusing. So anyways, it's overall, this is one of the games in the database. This is one of the old ones that chess.com is drawing from, but just really complicated, kind of not tactically aggressive, very old game. Which is interesting. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess I would just expect, the classical romantic style would be to play d5 here. So when I see a game that's this old, I would figure that d5 would be the move and that black would get good control over e4. But yeah, I guess this is interesting. I mean, d5 controlling e4 seems to be a good play for black. If pawn takes c5, bishop takes c5, and pressure on e3. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, for sure. I haven't gotten a chance to look over those, Richard, but I will definitely review your game. It won't be tonight. If you look at the schedule, like look at the upcoming schedule section of the Discord, the upcoming section of the upcoming schedule of the Discord, the games tonight for TK, for Lauren, and for Armenian, are the three games. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say. Just be sure to, these are what the games are for tonight. But I'll confirm your game soon, and it will be on the stream for sure. It just I have to wait for the other games to get looked at first. But yeah. Anyways, lots of very interesting games. And yeah. Cool. Let's take a look. I also wanted to take so we have those three games for tonight. And yeah. I guess what's interesting about this is, yeah, for sure, no problem. But basically D5 and pressure on E4, that seems to be a good, basically that seems to be the most straightforward strategy for black here. And yeah, knight to D5, knight to B4. Overall, black is better, and I don't know, what can we really, expect out of this opening? Black's up by about 5 pawns. Looks like a good situation for black. But yeah, interesting. I mean, I don't know. I was expecting a more Benoni type structure, so so that's the thing to look at here. Anyways, I wanted to look at some more games from Blackburn. We can look at him playing E4, E5. He's white in this situation. But yeah, E4, E5. Here's Blackburn playing white. And yeah, well, let's see. Steinitz, Blackburn, so two world champions. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop to B5. And here A6. So knight to E7 is not a move that we see very frequently. This is the Cosio defense. Cosio defense, knight to E7, knight G7 is the third most popular here. Much more common for black, knight to F6, the main line, and D6, which is the modern Steinitz defense. Steinitz opts for one that isn't either of those. This is the Cosio defense of the Ruy Lopez opening. D4, pawn takes, knight takes, queen takes. Basically here, white's going to be in a situation where, he's going to have aggressive threats on F7. Things are going to be pretty comfortable for white. This isn't much of a challenge in terms of white's play against black. I think white's going to have a tactical opportunity with A4 threatening on B5. But yeah, this is just a world champion game. Let's take a look at the eval. Like many of the old games like from back then, there isn't really much in the way of like they don't have the incredible accuracy scores that high level GM games do now. This is 95 versus 80. Just for clarity, like this is like way more inaccurate than the world champion games now would be. But anyways, E4, E5, knight F3, knight F6, and then we're looking at this this relatively obscure opening now, this Cosio defense. White challenges immediately with D4. This makes sense. White's going to probably end up playing like D5 and bishop to B3, C4. But yeah, basically White's going to have the ability to play bishop to B3 facing F7. And we'll end up with a pretty good situation, good center control, and a way to advance this. E takes D4, knight takes, queen takes, bishop to B3, and yeah, this bishop's facing F7. Might have some tactical opportunities. Probably I think White's best strategy is probably to undermine with A4, and then A takes B5. But here, yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say that white is white is comfortable. This doesn't really pose many challenges for white. I think white's going to have this E4 pawn, kind of straightforwardly there for the rest of the game. Probably be able to play rook E1, probably be able to play bishop to F4, probably be able to play knight to D2. But just develop in a normal structure, take control of the center, and yeah, be in a better place, in this game going forward. So yeah, rook to E1, C4, bishop to C2. Overall here, I guess it's just kind of straightforward development. White is better, and how is white going to, kind of maintain his strong position as we head into the endgame? I think the black's probably going to castle. White's main late middle game strategy will probably involve knight to G3, F4, F5, and basically putting pressure on the king side here. Queen H5, rook to E8, knight to G3, bishop to D8, and yeah, I guess I would just say, things like knight to F5. That seems like a pretty clean way to advance this. But overall, white is good. Not really much in the way of problems for white. Knight to F5, Yeah, White's going to advance his position. I don't know whether White wants to get his rook in. Like I would think like bishop to e3, rook a d1 facing against d6. That could be a good opportunity for White to play. But yeah, f6, a4, pawn takes. Overall here, White's good. White's up by about a pawn, pawn and a half, and should be able to advance this. Hey, welcome Stormix. Thanks for joining. We're looking over some old games from Blackburn. Blackburn basically has, a lot of very old kind of romantic classical games. These aren't as tactically, accurate as the current games, but they do have a lot of like, pretty impressive attacks, pretty impressive ways to kind of like solidify a strong attack. And I think they're just generally more fun to look at than other GM games. Like today, the modern games that have just been like, analyzed like crazy and like don't contain really brilliant like sacrifices or anything. Those are a lot less fun for me. These GM games, this GM move, which swings the eval by about 3.2 points, really reflects like a different era of the game. Like it's basically like these days, the eval lines are so ironed out. But if you look at the eval line here, White's going to be up by like 6 points. I mean, this is a huge difference. So anyways, I guess what I want to say is like basically we got to see a new opening, the Cozio defense with knight to e7, knight takes d4, and White's getting good center control. c3, c5, queen to d1, and basically White's going to exert pressure on f7, White's going to play queen to f3, and White's going to have good attacking opportunities and ability to expand on the king side. We saw this. This was interesting. And basically the pressure that White puts on Black's king side here leads him to a pretty interesting game. So I don't know. I mean, I guess what do you draw from this? Like it's kind of an interesting it's an interesting to see kind of classical openings being played. It's interesting to see a situation where super GMs are still playing kind of imperfectly, but it's really interesting to me. Like I don't know. I figure that when you look at games like this, you get to see what openings are playable at the super GM level, even if it is like an old classical GM. But also you get to see kind of a difference in the way that chess was played previously versus chess was played now. Like basically threats basically these kind of aggressive kingside threats are played less now, I guess I would say. Like this is more tactically active. This is a more tactically active game than you see out of GMs at this point. A4, D5, pawn takes B5, pawn takes B5, bishop to E3, all this stuff. Like basically White's going to consolidate his attack. White's going to start putting pressure on the king side. We saw what happens. Basically, this ends up being a cool tactic. Very imperfect is what what this comes down to, right? Like White's up by about a pawn and a half. Queen to C7. Queen to h3, and then both of those are given as inaccurate moves. Then this big inaccuracy, rook to d5, which basically gives this rook to d7 as a fork that basically concludes the game. So this rook is forking both rook takes g7 and queen on c7. And if the queen takes, then you get to play like knight to h3, discovered check, and then play queen takes d7. So anyways, I guess what I would say here is that that this type of situation, these types of tactics are very interesting, and that they don't come up at GM level anymore. Like here, rook to e5, a tactical imperfection that's this large, just doesn't get played that much in GM level play anymore. So like rook to d7 here, queen takes d7, knight to h6, and the game ends basically, right? But you just don't see attacks like this. They're kind of really ironed out. There's just not as much about it, So Blackburn's games are just really interesting. Like it just shows kind of a different era of games being played. Let's take a look at another one. Basically, this is a game from 1882. Again, Blackburn world champion. Basically playing classical openings. Look at this, like e4, c5, f4, like this just at the highest level of GM play just isn't played anymore. I don't even know what to do against this, to be honest. Like I guess it transposes into like probably the Grand Prix attack, but I mean it's just crazy to see GMs play this type of thing. Like okay, so it's the Grand Prix attack, right? Or no, it's not even. This isn't the Grand Prix attack. This is the McDonald attack. Like the Grand Prix would be knight to c3. So this high level GM stuff like e6, d5, it's just really different. like this pawn structure here, like wouldn't this pawn structure looks very easily undermined for black. Like with the pawn on e5, I think you can play d6 and just end up handing white a an isolated pawn on e5. So I just think it's interesting. I mean, we're just looking at a different era, right? Like this is just different. Chess being played differently. These classical players, like players, of this era, 1882, like, they just don't have the full understanding of like, yeah, okay, this pawn is advanced and this pawn is, controlling black's healthy development. But the end result of this is this d6, pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5 trade, where white's going to end up with this isolated pawn on the king file and not have really very much to go from there. So g3, f6, pawn takes, queen takes, d5. Basically, black, undermined the pawn on e5 and ends up with a huge center. So this is good. I guess is what I would say. Like this is a good way for black to play this out. Knight can play to f5, bishop can play to d6, bishop can play to d7. But black's got full center control, and I don't think white has much in the way of means to like disrupt it really. So I don't know. I guess it's surprising. I just this game is going to be interesting and it's going to be tactically interesting. I guess we should just play through it like in a straight line. But the opening was really interesting because I don't think you would ever see someone play that e4, f4, and e5. Like those are basically like those are two separate decision making points that like would never be played at Super GM level anymore. So very interesting in my mind. I don't know. So yeah, let's look at this again. E4, C5, F4. Like, this is crazy. Have I ever traveled somewhere far from home to play in a chess tournament? Not really. I've played in, I've played in the U.S., but I haven't played much internationally. So I guess if the question is, have I ever traveled really far from home, like internationally? Like, not really. But I have played in the U.S. a lot. I've traveled, like, across the United States to play, but that's not relative to the top level GMs. I don't think those guys play as or basically those. I don't think those guys the scale of how far they travel is way further than how far I travel. But look at this Blackburn game. Like who GMs. I don't think most expert players would play that. Good question at XLX. I think we all wondered that question at some point. I guess what I would say is if you want to take a look, XLX, I think what you can do is you can play Puzzle Battle. I think Puzzle Battle is a good way to kind of get better and better at this. Do you have chess.com XLX? Because Puzzle Battle is like a great way to play. Like I think that honestly, like it's way more fun to have training that involves competition than training that doesn't involve competition. So like let's just like we can go through and do like a puzzle battle here. But basically, if you have access to this tool, or if you have access to like Lichess Puzzle Storm, Lichess Puzzle Racer, or whatever, this is a way better. This is like a way better way to improve. I don't know. The thing about it is you sort of run out of ability to improve from this after a while, but that doesn't happen until you're at like master level. At this point, like I feel like I sort of am pretty comfortable with all the tactics that are going to come up here. But like when you're just improving and when you're going from like 1200 to like when you're going from like 1200 to like 2000, this is a great way to improve. So yeah, I'd highly recommend like going after this. If you really want to improve, play Puzzle Battle. It's a lot of fun. Like honestly, playing against somebody else makes it so much easier to focus. Like you're actually like trying to compete and stuff. It's really good practice relative to everything else. So if you want to improve the quickest way, and not be bored while you're doing it, like I think just playing like this for a long time. Does it say what the rating mix? Sorry, what? The tactic mixes. No, it doesn't. It doesn't say. But yeah, it's pretty much. Honestly, like it's just practice on this. It's pretty I don't know. I guess I would say it's pretty. You get used to it is the main thing. You get used to seeing all the patterns. You get better and better at it, and I don't know. It's less of a trick than it's less of a a skill than it looks like. But yeah, you can get to the point where you're a lot stronger. Let's see. If you do this for like an hour or two a day, like it will make you so much better. It's a really like efficient way to improve. Today's lesson is I was looking at GM games. We were looking at Blackburn games, but at the same time, I figured that Blackburn games, they're interesting. I was looking at them as kind of a look at like old classical games and how they like differ from current games. But yeah, I wanted to play some Puzzle Battle too. Puzzle Battle is always fun, and I got spurred by XLX's question, which was basically, what can I do to improve? And the answer is, if you do Puzzle Battle for enough, up until the time you're about a master, you're going to improve the most from that. So this is a great tool. I just wanted to show it off because I think it's a really good one for improving quickly. So yeah, definitely keep this in mind. And I think it will be very helpful if you do it a lot. So here, I'll speed up and make sure that I win this one. Assuming I don't mess it up. Let's see. Cool, I think I got this right. Should be good. Yeah, cool. All right, just wanted to take a short break and show off that tool, XLX. But yeah, XLX, Puzzle Battle, Puzzle Rush, just do it for like an hour or two a day. Really study hard and and basically, like put music on, or you can even do it in front of the television. But basically, just make sure that you put the time in. That's the most important thing. So the lesson today, we were looking over Blackburn games. I just thought it was crazy. This one that we were looking at, like, basically these are like super GMs. Like these are the equivalent of like super GMs from like 1880, and they're playing these openings that are just crazy. So like Sicilian defense, McDonald attack. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I guess what I would say, XLX, is you put in as much time as you want. But if you want to improve, definitely do that. Basically you will end up improving a lot if you do that. So this e4 c5 f4 this ends up in a situation where white is strong. White's playing the McDonald attack, but it ends up being a very different type of opening than you see in the modern day. So knight to c3, knight to f3 plays from white. But yeah, but what the main point is, XLX, if you want to improve the most efficiently, if you want to like improve most for the time that you're putting in, really focus on tactics. That's the best that you can do, and I think if you study tactics hard, you will improve quickly. So yeah, that's your best opportunity, XLX. I think that will be the most helpful. And here, this is the McDonald attack: knight f3, e6, d5. Just overall, this opening is really strange. It's just not what high level GMs would play now. With d6, pawn takes d5, or pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5, white's going to be worse here. So, anyways, that's just something to consider, and black's up by about half a pawn. So yeah, d6, pawn takes pawn, and white and black has the ability to undermine the center here. But yeah, tactical study is the answer. Puzzle Battle, Puzzle Rush, do as much of it as you can. You'll be seeing combinations that you don't see now. Basically under 2000, like more than half the games are determined on like tactical errors, like 2 and 3 move tactics that get missed. So yeah, under 2000, definitely study tactics. Make that the biggest part of your training. I think that's gonna be the most helpful. Thank you very much for the subscription, XLX. Really appreciate it. Yeah, no, thank you for supporting the stream. Also, never feel obligated to give any money. I'm doing this for free because chess lessons should be free and they can be free. So I'm trying to just make it as accessible to everyone as I can. But yeah, but if you go from puzzle, basically Puzzle Battle, Puzzle Rush, if you just do enough of it, you'll be much better. Anyways, basically d6 is the way to undermine the center here, and with d6, pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5, black should have a good, kind of a good route forward. Knight to h6, g3, queen takes, d5. Now black's got basically way better center control, way better opportunity to attack, and yeah, I guess I just sort of wanted to show off this game. To me, it blows my mind that basically the response to the Sicilian used to be f4, or that would be something that a high-level GM would play at that period in time. That's pretty unusual, pretty different than current play, but I don't know. I guess it's sort of instructive to just show the time period and kind of show how things have changed. So anyways, yeah, no, thank you, XLX. Always appreciated. So yeah, queen takes, rook takes. All of this ends up being pretty good for black. Rook to c4, sure, seems good. But yeah, black's much better. Black's in this situation much better, and it's gonna kind of sort of like basically try to keep pushing forward on this. All right, let's take a look at some viewer games. I'm interested in looking at some viewer games now too. I've got a few scheduled for tonight, and then something weird. I think something weird may have happened to the ones for this morning. Let me just check the ones from this morning. Yeah, so something strange happened with the games for this morning. So tonight we've got games for TK, we've got games for Lauren, and we've got one for Armenian Falcon. We'll take a look at these. So yeah, let's get to those now. First one here. This game is for TK. And TK is playing white here. So yeah, let's see. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop C4, bishop C5. Okay, Italian game. Hey, welcome, Lord Flows. Thank you very much for joining the stream. This is TK's game. I think this is an IM. If I think this is an IM, some titled player. But basically, this is TK's game. TK's often here on the stream, and sends in a lot of games against titled players. So I'm always happy to look them over. All right, so we got the Evans Gambit. So let's look at the Evans Gambit, right? There's a few different responses to Evans Gambit. The three main ones, or there's actually four. There's four. There's bishop to a5, bishop to c5, bishop to e7, and bishop to d6. I actually like bishop to d6. Yeah, so XLX, go with chess.com puzzles, chess.com puzzle rush, and chess.com puzzle battle. If you do those, if you do enough of those, it will be the quickest way that you improve. I don't know exactly what your rating is right now, but if you want to improve the most efficiently below like about 2000 level, make it really heavy on tactics, like probably 90% of your game on tactics. Like, it's great to understand like classical games. It's great to understand like, positional understandings and, opening theory. But in terms of like what actually happens in a game, you're only going to see a particular opening like 5 or 10% of the games that you play. But you're going to see tactical play in every single game. After about 2000, everyone gets really good at tactics. So like, you don't have that much ability to beat people based on your tactical knowledge. But at the level that you're at, like, if you're 1500, 1600, your opponents are making big time tactical mistakes all the time. So you can basically just, play solidly, steer things towards tactical positions, and end up in a situation where you can just win based on tactics. That happens a lot. At some point, you're going to have to circle back and get a more premium, or basically a more complete understanding of positional chess and opening theory. But from 1200 to 2000, making that transition, yeah, so cool, yeah, 1060, awesome. So I guess what I would say there, XLX, is just basically just stick with it. Play. But if you really want to improve the quickest from that level, your opponents at that level are like hanging pieces to 1 and 2 move tactics frequently. So if you just do enough puzzle rush, puzzle battle, all of those tactics, yeah, Lee Chess Puzzle Storm is the same thing. It doesn't matter which puzzle trainer it is, but if you can put as much time into puzzle training as you possibly can, you're going to start seeing things that are way more, way stronger on the board. Like, you're going to just see a lot of opportunities come up. You won't be able to prepare for everything ahead of time, but you'll be able to take the pattern recognition that you get from doing a lot of puzzles, and then apply it to basically apply it to the actual game situations that you see. So that's what I'm saying, XLX. I think that's probably the best way forward. And yeah, definitely stick with the puzzle training, stick with the tactics, and you will end up in a good place eventually. That's what I would say. It will really help, and it is the quickest return on your time at the level that you're at. I'm very confident that that's true. All right, so now we're looking at the Evans Gambit. So Evans Gambit, basically black has to take on b4. Bishop to b6, or bishop to a5 is the main line. Bishop to c5 is the McDonald defense. Bishop to d6 is the Stone-Ware variation. Bishop to e7 is the Anderson variation. So, I don't know. I really like how chess.com names all the openings. I think that's really cool. So yeah, I've gotten to learn how a lot more work off of this. So bishop to a5 is the main line. Bishop to c5 is the McDonald defense. Bishop to d6 is the Stone-Ware variation. And bishop to e7 is the Anderson variation. Okay, bishop to a5, d4, e takes d4. They're calling this the Pierce defense, okay? Castles, and with knight to e7, it's the Mises defense. So they all really have very distinct names for all of these lines. But yeah, this is how this opening goes. c3, bishop to a5, way most common with d4. E takes d4, castles. I don't know, Richard. To be completely honest, it's a really good question. But I guess what I'm kind of curious about is like, it's we kept finding weird names of openings, and it is kind of funny because I at least me, like, I played a lot of tactics. I like didn't study openings that much. I studied like positional play when I was improving. So I'm actually like way behind in terms of knowing like what different openings and opening variations are called. So for me, it's actually really fun to go on the stream and like actually like learn all of these. Like I'm so far behind in learning them, but at the same time, like it's great to have the opportunity. So bishop to a4 is the main line. Pawn take after d4, pawn, and after bishop to a5, d4 is like by far the most common move. So white has like a few different opportunities here. Either d4 main move, castles. Castles is called the slow variation. All right. Queen to b3. This is still, I guess this isn't a named line, but d4 is really d4 is the main move here. And after pawn takes d4, this is the Pierce defense. The other opportunity here was d6. This is the Bronstein defense. So in terms of learning these openings, we're basically looking at main line. So all of these things are okay. But let's go through them one more time. Main line, McDonald defense, Stone-Ware variation, Anderson variation, and then in this main line, d4, pawn takes d4 is the Pierce defense, and d6 is the Bronstein defense. Honestly, these types of things, I guess what I would say, basically just end up in, I mean, literally speaking, yeah, there probably are that many transpositions. But yeah, $1 trillion for sure is the 1 trillion openings. It's basically it's pretty wild how much variation there is. So yeah, d4, d6. There is an aphelion variation. If you come up with an opening, Richard, if you come up with an opening that's not recognized in the chess.com opening book, you can send like the opening line, and we'll just name it after you. I don't know if it'll stick or not, but we can name it after you. Maybe we'll see if it goes anywhere. So yeah, d4, d6, queen to b3, Tartakower attack. All right. Castles, Lasker defense. I mean, it's really cool. They're all named, which is really what's kind of amazing. And this isn't even a complete description. This is just like, I'm sure this is just pulled from somewhere, but probably like pulled from the ECO or MCO or whatever. But anyways, let's look at this game. I'm stuck on the different opening prep. But bishop to a5, d4, pawn takes d4. This is the Mises defense with knight to e7. And yeah, what are the opportunities for white here? So black's looking fine. It's basically white has practical compensation against white has practical compensation against the pawn that was sacrificed. So white can play pawn takes d4 here and end up one pawn down. White's going to have an aggressive attack on f7. White's going to have an aggressive attack with like bishop to g5, knight to d2. Strong plays by white. So yeah, I think knight to g5 and pressure on f7 is probably good. I don't know. What's the engine suggesting? What's the opening book suggesting? So knight to g5 is the main line. C takes d4. These are the two main lines. Either c takes d4 or knight to g5. White plays knight to g5. Okay, that's still in book. d5, pawn takes d5, knight takes d5, rook e1, knight to e7. Okay, cool. So here white's up by a good amount. I guess this is an error for black. Let's look at this. So with knight to e5, then rook to e1, and basically white's getting all this pressure. Is there an app for chess.com? Is it all on the internet? There is an app for chess.com. I haven't used it, to be completely honest. Yeah, I use the browser. I haven't. I mean, I use chess.com as a browser on my phone occasionally. I haven't bothered to download the app, but yeah, that's cool. Chess.com has an app. I just haven't used it. Um, if you ever look at the scripting for chess.com, there's some very there's some interesting scripting on it. At least on the web app is yeah, I'm sure there is a chess.com app, but there's some very interesting web app scripting. I mean, the one thing that I would show you that's kind of cool is there's just some clunky scripting on here. I don't know if you're a developer or not, but like take this one for example. If you click on this link, it will join you automatically. Basically, it's using it's basically using a path to perform an action, and that's sort of interesting. But yeah, if you click that link right there, it will automatically join the club for you, which is kind of cool. But yeah, people have. Anyways, that's just something. If you click that app, it will auto join. But yeah, the app is pretty cool. Or the app or the web app is cool. It does a lot of things. The chess.com mobile app I don't know about. So yeah, this pressure. Yeah, take a look. Rook to knight to e5, rook to e1, knight to d7, queen to f3, castles, queen to h5. So yeah, basically, white gets this good opportunity. The way to capitalize on this is with knight takes f7, king takes f7, and then queen to f3. And basically, this king's going to be forced somewhere really awkward, like either king to g8, in which case you play like rook takes e7, or you play bishop to a3. But basically, get this really aggressive, attack going. So yeah, this is an interesting. I want to look at the sideline for a minute. This knight to e7, knight to g5 is an aggressive sideline. Knight takes d5 is a blunder. Rook to e1 is playable, and if black blocks with a piece on e7, the white knight can sack on f7, and then white can play bishop to a3 as a follow-up. So rook e1, knight d7, queen to f3 threatening f7, castles, queen to h5, and basically here white's up by like a pawn, 1.3 pawns. But after queen to h5, bishop to f5 shuts down any forward-looking attack. There's just not much for white here after bishop to f5, which defends h7. So yeah, I guess in terms of looking at improvements for white in this game, since TK as white sent this in, white's basically focused on attacking h7 here. So yeah, here knight ce7, queen to f3, castles, queen to h5, h6. Rook takes, queen takes, knight to d5, knight to d2, and yeah, I guess the black basically gets the better side of this position. So in terms of improving this, castles, knight to e7, knight to g5 focuses on f7, pawn takes, queen takes, rook e1, knight to e7, and now white's up by a lot. So I guess what I would say here is queen to h5 is an error. Bishop to f5 can deal with this too easily. In terms of improving the situation for white, bishop to a3 seems like a good path forward. Basically, this is pushing hard on e7 and f8, and then yeah, with bishop on a3 facing towards f8, probably. I mean, among other things, this bishop is threatening to take on d5. So with bishop a3, if black plays some random move like bishop to b6 or something, bishop takes, and then this bishop on a3 is exploiting the pin. So bishop to a3 is a big improvement over queen to h5. There's just not enough to generate a solid attack on h7. So yeah. No, but that's sort of just stick with it. Just stick with it, XLX. If you keep doing it, if you play enough of them, you really will be able to kind of get your pattern recognition better and better. It gets easier, I promise. It's just one of those things. If you do it enough times for a long enough time, it really will improve your game. And the thing about it is not the fact that you're just playing Puzzle Battle to get better at Puzzle Battle, but you're playing Puzzle Battle to basically you're playing Puzzle Battle to basically improve at regular chess. And if you recognize the positions in Puzzle Battle, if you've seen them enough times, eventually that's going to burn those positions into your brain, and you're going to be able to basically you're going to be able to basically do well out of those in the game. So, anyways, that knowledge will carry over. So I would definitely recommend sticking with it. Rook takes, queen takes, knight to d2. These combinations end up being good for black. Yeah. So, anyways, interesting. Let's look through this again. c3, bishop a5, d4, pawn takes, castles. And this bishop to a3 is going to be kind of a persistent thing. This bishop to a3 is basically going to be pushing against the king side. White's going to be able to, basically knight to g5, and there's going to be pressure getting exerted on f7. This knight to d5 was really the blunder. For black, I think black can probably castle here. The engine given move is knight to e5, but this deals with the threats on f7 pretty well. After rook to e1, there's lots of threats from this rook on this open file, from this bishop and knight on f7, and from this bishop on a3 facing towards f8. Improvements for white. Queen to f3 was not quite as good as this knight to f7 tactic that the engine's proposing. So that was the first thing that's an improvement. Again, I don't know how easy these things are to see. This is difficult. Rook to e1 was definitely correct, but I think in terms of follow-ups, bishop to a3 and knight takes f7 are considered to be the two best ones. Queen to h5 also playable. So queen to h5 would be better than queen to f3. At least there, black would be forced to defend with like g6, which would weaken his king side. But yeah, with queen to f3 facing f7, black castles, queen to h5, and black's okay. This dealt with that threat pretty well. So rook to e1, and then knight takes f7 or bishop to a3 are better. But yeah, I guess what I would say is queen to h5. So anyways, it's interesting. Black plays h6, knight to d2. Black is fine. So the game sort of ends after this. So the improvements really had to do with two attacking moves. Two ways of following this up. First one was queen to h5 was better, bishop to a3 was better, and knight takes f7 was better than queen to f3. This just isn't the correct continuation for this attack. Black can castle, and then the threat on f7 goes away. If you play queen to h5, then black can't castle. So if you're looking at threats on h5, queen to h5 has a very key advantage. So castles, so it's basically the same sequence on both sides, XLX. If your third puzzle is the same as the third puzzle for the other person. So it's not as if it's like random puzzles. It's like it's exactly the same puzzles scaling up at the same difficulty for the two players, XLX. Rook to e1, queen to h5, knight takes, and I guess I would say black's better after that. So the two errors, queen to f3 was too slow, and then queen to h5 was dealt with too easily. So queen to h5 was the move if you wanted to move the queen. Other alternatives include bishop to a3. Bishop to a3 is one, and knight takes f7 is two tactical. They are they definitely are. Like on Puzzle Battle, it's the same person. You can even see. If you finish early or you miss your puzzles, you can basically click on the one that your opponent is completing at the same time. Like the X's that show for your opponent, you can click on those and see how they're doing those puzzles, if you want on Puzzle Battle. But it's a great training tool because it's like competitive and like it keeps you, like for me at least, if it's competitive, you're more likely to do it. It's not just sort of like sitting there training. If there's actually a game aspect to it, it makes things a lot easier. Anyways, TK, your improvement, queen to f3 and queen to h5, those were the two moves that I think are worthy of examination. Queen to h5 immediately makes more sense than queen to f3. And overall, thank you very much for sending the game. Thanks as always, TK. Always appreciate it. All right, the next game's from Lauren. Let's take a look. Cool. So Lauren always sends these really cool theoretical games. This one's out of this Rossalimo attack. Basically, bishop to b5 played against the Sicilian, always interesting. And then let's take a look at the different lines here. So the lines for black are g6, fianchetto variation, d6. That's, I guess they switched what attack that is. That's the canal attack. Okay, e6 and b3. Or sorry, e6 and knight to f6, queen to f6. Yeah, let's block that one. I think we can not have that. Anyways, bishop to b5 against queen to b6. Yeah, it is, Jonathan. Yep. Thanks for coming, Jonathan. Thanks for being here. Bishop to b5, queen to b6. Well, let's think about that for a second, Jonathan. Why do you think that I'm blocking your messages? Well, why do you think? I'm just curious. This is actually kind of entertaining. I don't know. Anyways, yeah, no, of course. Thanks, XLX. Appreciate it. Have a good one. Yeah, you got that one through, Jonathan. Good. Queen c6, d4, pawn takes, knight takes, queen to c7. And yeah, no, it is. It is actually pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie. No, it's all on auto mod now. We had some crazy ones yesterday, so I was just like, whatever, just turn auto mod on. I don't know. I think it's funny at least. Anyways, well, what can you do? It is though. It definitely is entertaining. All right. Anyways, bishop to b5, queen b6, knight to c3, e6, castles, a6, bishop takes, queen takes. Okay, so this is the Rossalimo. I don't know exactly what. Don't know. You talk about that. I think it's the frames per second, Jonathan. As long as we're thinking about that. I don't have much to say except I think it's frames per second, but 30 seems to be about as high as it goes. But yeah, I would assume that's frame speed. Good question though, Jonathan. Pawn takes d5, knight takes d4, queen to c7, f4. I just have a regular laptop. It's not a gaming laptop or anything. Just a random one. Jen was nice enough to get me a nice camera, so that was cool. h3, queen to e6, queen to e3, d6, king to h1, e5. I don't know. I guess white's just sort of advancing here, and yeah, it's basically I don't know. I guess I would say like this is I mean, I don't know. It's pressure being placed on a pinned piece. But let's go back for a second because I sort of think we got ahead of ourselves on this this opening theory. So e6, castles, a6, bishop takes, queen takes. This is main line. I mean, out of this there's like 76 games or whatever. And yeah, d4 is probably going to be the best opportunity for white. d4, c takes, knight takes, queen to c7. And then yeah, like rook e1 or a4. I mean, these are probably the best. These are probably the best continuations for white. But white has pretty good center control overall. Rossalimo attack. It's a comfortable position for white. We can just sort of keep going through the theory. f4 is kind of unusual. I wonder what basically f4 and basically this e5 pawn is defended. Bishop to c5, probably king to h1. I don't know. White's comfortable, I guess. This is all fine. King to h1, f5, knight to b3. Overall, I think white will just be okay. Knight to e2, knight f6, c3. No problems here. White's got a comfortable game. In terms of looking at this, like where things shifted here, there's a little bit of volatility here. f4 is aggressive. Basically puts too much pressure on the center here. But f4 basically leads to black being ahead. Mainline move here is not f4. It's rook to e1. With rook to e1, you're providing support for the center. Then maybe you can play f4, e5, or f4, f5, and there will be more of a, there will be more pressure on black here. But yeah, so f4 is what was played in this game. C3, queen to d3, bishop to e3. And yeah, I guess I would just say black or white is white is fine. The position's solid. It's a game basically. I think white can end up putting more pressure on the king side. King to h1 is setting white up for pressure on the king side. And then the move here for white is f takes e5, d takes e5, and then queen to g3. So that was really the improvement for white in this situation. Basically you don't have to hang this piece. If you play pawn takes e5, queen to g3. Yeah, that's about right, XLX. Yeah. If you want to switch over to Puzzle Rush or Puzzle Storm or Puzzle Racer, those are free alternatives on Lichess. I've done like Puzzle Racer a couple times. I think the puzzles that they give you are a little bit different, like in terms of what they look like. But yeah, you can always look on there. And those are tactics trainers too. The most important thing is just you put the time in. It doesn't really matter what tactic trainer it is. There's also one called CT-ART. That's his standalone program that's not online. But that's actually literally what I use to go from about 1200 to about 2000. I guess here basically this queen on g3 is facing off against this queen on c7. Rook ac1, bishop a7, f5. White's fine. So f6, pawn takes, queen to h6, king to h8. Given a brilliancy, that seems generous. These both seem generous. King h8 and rook to c7 both are given brilliancies here. And here after bishop to e6, knight to f4, and pressure is going to get pretty big on the king side. So basically rook here, and then knight takes e6, rook to e8. And then either I guess it's rook fc1, right? Yeah, or knight to g6 potentially. I don't know. It's up to you as white, but it's pretty interesting. It's an interesting game overall, Lauren. So in terms of I'm assuming that since it's not labeled, I'm assuming that that white is the side that you were interested in looking at here. f4 was overly aggressive. This was not as good as rook to e1. Which was the main line. Knight to e2, knight to f6, c3, bishop to c5. And basically here, I guess I would say that this queen to d3, black's up by about half a pawn. Bishop to e3, knight g4, h3, queen takes. So yeah, I guess here, what do you think? Black's up by about a pawn here. But white's going to continue to push on the king side and end up in a situation where he's got pretty good attacking chances. So the way to salvage this, the real tactical misstep by white here, pawn takes e5, queen to g3, and this saves the knight. There's nothing else there that saved that knight. That was the issue. f5, pawn takes. This gets into a crazy tactical position, but I sort of want to pay attention to what was objectively better before. These obviously are awesome tactics, don't get me wrong, but like you've misplayed tactically to get into this issue. Knight to f5, threatening e6, cool. White's up by about 3.8 pawns. All right, looks like a win for white. But the error here, white didn't have to give up this knight on d4. Instead, with e5, pawn takes e5, queen to g3, and white's just better. So, anyways, interesting situation, interesting outcome, and thank you very much, Lauren, for sending the game. Cool. Thank you very much for the follow, Ramirez. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining. Cool. And here's an Armenian Falcons game. Let's take a look at this one. Okay, Armenian Falcon plays the ready against d5. Okay. d4, knight to c6. I think knight to c6 is wrong. I think knight to c6 is probably not the best move for black here. Basically, knight to c6 is going to block in this c5 pawn. It's basically like playing knight to c3 or knight to c6 in a queen's pawn game. That's basically what this has turned into. It's no longer the ready. So if you're playing knight to c6, then you're blocking in your c7 pawn, and your c7 pawn can't do much. So like, c5 would be a valuable resource for black. c6 could be a valuable defensive resource for black. And with knight to c6, you're sort of blocking against both of them. So I would recommend a different move for black here. Knight to c3, knight f6, e3, bishop to g4, bishop to e2. Overall here, white's up by about 2/10 of a pawn. h3, h5, castles, bishop to d6. And yeah, I guess I would just say white's pretty comfortable. Not really much, and I'd say it's about equal. Maybe rook to e1, maybe bishop to b5, but honestly, white, white's in a comfortable place. Black not having the standard resource, the standard ability to play c5 and c6. This is something that white will be able to exploit later in this game. So I like white's play so far, no issues. Let's just keep going. Okay, knight to d2. I don't think that's too terrible a move either. I guess it's sort of undeveloping your piece, but it makes sense in the context of threatening this bishop on h5. So yeah, you're undeveloping it, but I don't know. No, I don't dislike this as much as the engine does. I guess they're saying bishop to g6, and then what do you do to continue your development? Or it takes moves to continue your development, and that's sort of annoying for white here. So knight to b3, knight to b4, bishop to d3, knight takes, and yeah, I guess what I would say here is that black's up by about, I don't know, 3/10 of a pawn. Yeah, fine. Bishop e3, queen c7. White's just, I guess I would just say white's comfortable. So where were the white missteps here? Like, what were the mistakes that white made? Yeah, so I don't know. I guess white's up by, white just wins. But let's look at the hey, welcome Abraham. Thanks for joining the stream. So I think that in terms of looking at things to improve, I wouldn't have played knight to c3 here either. Knight to c3 basically blocks in this c3 pawn. I understand it's symmetrical, but the same way that black needs the c5, c6 resource, white's going to want to have that c3, c4 resource. So I think that this is not a great play for white. Not terrible, doesn't cause any immediate problems, but knight to c3 was only played in 7 out of 5,000 games, and c4 was played in 2,000 out of 5,000 games. You want this pawn out, basically. You basically want this pawn to be attacking the center, and then you can comfortably play knight to c3. But if you play knight to c3, you're going to be missing that c pawn, that c pawn resource for the rest of the game. So yeah, c4 much better than knight to c3, and yeah, I think that's an improvement for white. Anyways, this continues on. The engine doesn't like knight to d2. I'm not so worried about that. It makes sense, at least in the context of the broader attack. On bishop to g6, which is the engine given best move, maybe you have more development problems as white, but I didn't really dislike knight to d2 as much as the engine did. At least it made sense to me. And here, bishop to d3. Okay, bishop to d3 relative to a5. Knight to a5. Again, I don't think this is a terrible move. I mean, I think basically white needs something to defend against this, basically to defend against this threat on c2. So yeah, this makes sense. This, the engine is looking at, okay, well, it's better to counterattack knight a5, knight to b7 here, and just give up the c2 pawn. But bishop to d3, pawn takes d3, and yeah, I'm comfortable with this as white. So d takes c5 is considered to be better than bishop to e3 here. That's sort of interesting. All right, so let's take a look at this, since we haven't really had too much focus on things for white to improve. Hey, welcome Limestone. Thanks for joining the stream. But yeah, basically pawn takes e5 here is better than trading on d4. So I guess this is mostly to do with what pawn structures are there when the situation ends. So like, bishop to e3, pawn takes d4, bishop takes d4. Okay, black ends up with these two pawns on a7 and b6 on the queen side. If you take on c5 though, if pawn takes c5, then b takes c5, and black's pawn structure is like noticeably worse, right? A pawn and c pawn, and both are isolated. So this is something to review. I think this is really important to understand, kind of depending on what level you are. Basically having isolated pawns is bad. Isolated pawns in general is bad because the pawns can't defend each other. But if the pawns get isolated, they can become very open to attacks, and then the only pieces that you can use to defend them are other pieces. So any piece attacks you make on an isolated pawn is going to have to be responded to by a defensive response from another piece. So that's sort of that's sort of what's going on here. So why is pawn takes c5 better than pawn takes better than bishop to e3, waiting for this pawn to take on d4? It's because pawn takes c5 fractures this pawn structure. So pawn takes c5, knight takes c5, bishop takes c5, pawn takes c5. Then the pawn structure basically these pawns are isolated on the a file and the c file. If this pawn takes and then the pawn takes, it's the same problem, just with more material on the board. But the other way, the pawns remain connected. So like the bishop, the pawn on b6 isn't attackable because the a7 pawn is defending it. So this provides an opportunity for white to improve here. Basically, d takes c5 gives white an opportunity to have a basically mangle black's pawn structure on the queen side. So given the choice between those two, the one where black's pawn structure stays stays connected, and the one where it gets split, pawn takes c5 splitting the pawns apart is really the improvement. So yeah, even though bishop to e3 is a developing move and developing in general is good, the lasting damage that this fracturing of the pawn structure causes is worth more than the one move of one tempo worth of development. Anyways, really interesting. So pawn takes c5 is better than bishop to e3 for white. Knight to g3, bishop takes, rook takes, and yeah, that looks like a pretty big tactical error. Let's see. D takes c5 could be an opportunity for white. Obviously black is going for pawn takes e5 or pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, but I think you can just play like pawn takes c5 and win some pawns over here. You can just kind of ignore the threat. I got to 2200 USCF, Abraham. It's a good question. In the United States, you can get to be an NM by getting your rating over 2200. But yeah, Abraham, that's the rule in the United States. I think it differs from country to country, to be honest. If you want a master title, Abraham, what's your rating, Abraham? Like 1700 or so, right? I do want to show you this. Basically, if you want to get a FIDE title, you can get a FIDE title. You can become a FIDE master, basically. I wanted to show you this thing, which is pretty cool. I bring it up sometimes. But if you want to become a FIDE master, you can just become a FIDE master. Like, you have to play on their website, and you have to have a rating over a certain level. But the lowest threshold rating, this Arena Candidate Master, is 150 bullet games, 100 blitz games, or 50 rapid games with a performance rating of over 1100. That's something to consider, Abraham, because I know that you're like pretty solid. You're like 1700 or something, and you beat me in the simul. But yeah, basically here, you can get the FIDE Arena chess, like the official FIDE sanctioned client, and you can get your official first master title online. Felion, who sometimes comes by, he's basically he's also a master under the FIDE system. He got his Arena Candidate Master in the last month or so. So yeah, so you go get the FIDE Arena chess. So basically, arena titles can be earned online using FIDE's server, but it's a completely legit FIDE master title. This is basically, you're looking at these FIDE titles. FIDE titles, you have Grandmaster, International Master, FIDE Master, Candidate Master, but you also actually have these ones at the end of the list. Arena GM, Arena IM, and these ones. But if you sign up for the Arena FIDE Chess, like the FIDE Chess Arena, you can get arena titles. I got mine. I got my AGM title recently. But yeah, if you want to become a master and say that you're a FIDE master, this is a way that you can do it. And yeah, just so you know, that option is out there. If you don't learn anything else from this stream, this is your quickest route to get a master title from FIDE. So yeah, definitely something to consider. But you get your full, it's a master title. It's an official FIDE master title. So that's an option that's available if you're at all interested. Thought you might like that one, Abraham. But yeah, thanks for being here. But yeah, if you want to become a FIDE master, just the only thing I say is, if you become a FIDE master, just tell me, because I put a Felion's name. I basically, when a Felion got his FIDE master title, I advertised it, or basically I put it on our club page. So yeah, if you get a FIDE master title, please let me know, and then we can put you on the club page as people who got their master title because of the stream. We've got one so far. I'm hoping for more. Yeah. Basically, rook takes, queen takes, pawn takes, and yeah, here white's fine again. But this line was not as good for white. Yeah, no, you should get it. It's if you need any help, you can ask me or you can ask Aphelion. Both of us got our FIDE Master titles recently. But yeah, go get your FIDE Master title. Like almost nobody knows that route exists. Like it's very few people at this. Like it's only been around for a few years, but like very few people know that you can become a FIDE Master online. So yeah, it's kind of something that's specific to this stream. Like it can be helpful to know that. So yeah, if you didn't learn anything else, you can learn that you can get your first FIDE official title online on their web client. So yeah, anyways, rook takes, bishop takes, pawn takes. Yeah, no, seriously, Abraham, if you get your FIDE title, just let me know. Like honestly, it's an official FIDE title. There's 12 FIDE titles, or 9. Is it 9? No, there's 12 FIDE titles. It's 4 of them. 4 of them you can get from your online client. It's an official FIDE Master title. You can even ask the tournament director to put it on the wall chart or whatever. But yeah, if you get one, let me know. We'll put it on the club page. So yeah, here. So in terms of improving moves for white, the first one I would say knight to c3 blocks in your c pawn, so I would avoid that. I'd play c4 before playing knight to c3. Second improvement, yeah, for sure, Abraham. Yeah, no problem. Hope it's helpful. Yeah, yeah, if you end up getting your FIDE Master title, Abraham, if you get a FIDE Master title, just let me know that you got one. I don't know if you have a FIDE profile, or if you have a FIDE number, you can also directly get a FIDE number by signing up for that website too. So some people really want to have a FIDE rating, FIDE number and stuff. So you can get one directly from signing up for that website. Yeah. So anyways, e4, bishop to b4, f3, bishop to e3. Overall here, white's up by about half a pawn. Okay. And yeah, this was an error. You should have just left everything on the board, played like queen to f3 here. Queen to f3, and the queen will be threatening the queen on c6. Yeah, that'll be better for white by about 4 pawns, but playing the rook takes is not necessary here. You're not really in that bad shape. You can just play queen to f3 facing off on queen to c6 and be fine as white. Rook takes, queen takes, everything's fine. You should still be slightly better as white with the 2 pieces against the rook, but you really shouldn't have traded off that exchange. So anyways, in terms of improvements for this game, I'll just go through really fast. Knight to c3, not as good as c4, and then knight to c3, first improvement for white. Second is bishop to d3 was, I thought, fine. The engine didn't like it, but I thought it was fine. And then here, first, on bishop takes e4, pawn takes c5 is better, just ignoring this threat entirely. But even with this having happened, you can continue, you play bishop to f4 and get that free momentum on the queen, but you can play queen to f3 here and pin the knight to the queen. So this is your improvement for white, queen to f3 as opposed to rook takes. And it matters a lot, because it's basically the difference of an exchange versus not the exchange. Here that queen f3 is facing queen to c6, pin to c6, and yeah, all's good here. So anyways, interesting situation. White's up by about 4 pawns, and yeah, interesting. Thank you for sending the game, Armenian Falcon. The moves that I'd look at are knight to c3 for kind of opening positional reasons, and then I'd look at queen to f3 as a tactical improvement later in this game. So thanks for sending it. Thanks for sending it, Armenian Falcon. I appreciate it. And yeah, let's take a look. We've got maybe time for 1 or 2 more. Here's one from Sam Sejwani. Here's one from Ivan Kaur. Here's one from Pravilo. Okay, interesting. All right. Yeah, what's the website so you can create an account? Let's take a look. It's arena.net is the website. It's that client. Yeah, you have to sign up. I think it costs like 25 euros a year, which I don't, I don't like paying money for anything, but yeah, fide.myarena.net, and you can get your official FIDE title on there. So I don't know, might as well. No one else knows about it yet, so it might be a good opportunity for you. Okay, let's take a look at a few. There's a few more GM games. Maybe we can take a look. I don't know. I guess I would say Carlson has the most interesting ones most of the time. So has the most original ideas and things. So we can take a look at a Carlson game, I guess. Let's see. Here's a famous one. This is Carlson versus Ernst. This was basically a very old one in Weekend Z. Basically, way before. Yeah, no worries. No worries, Abraham. No, you can just Google it. It's arena.myfide.net. Just all as one thing. But yeah, you can take a look at it. So yeah, here's Carlson versus Ernst here, yeah. So knight to c3, pawn takes, knight takes, and basically this is a mainline Caro-Kann, h5, bishop to d3, queen takes d3, and I think this might be useful, right? So this is Carlson when he was 2450, playing a mainline Caro-Kann, and here I don't know. I guess I would say e6, bishop to f4, knight gf6. Basically this is a good way to play this, because we know the main line. So what does Carlson do once you're at like move 10 of the main line? This is kind of valuable information to know. So queen takes d3, e6, bishop to f4. Yeah, for sure, Abraham. Yeah, if you get your first master title, if you become a FIDE master, I think you'll have a good chance at it. To be honest, Aphelion has a FIDE master title now. So yeah, just let me know, Abraham, when you get it, and keep coming back to the stream. Tell me how close you're getting to getting that FIDE title, because no one knows about those FIDE titles. It's kind of crazy, right? Like you'd figure that people spend their whole lives like working to get a FIDE title, and FIDE's just like FIDE's just like giving those away, right? So or FIDE's like giving you like a really good opportunity to get them. So I'm sort of surprised that nobody's like jumping all over that opportunity. But yeah, no, go get your FIDE master title, Abraham. Become a titled master. This is a great route to do it, and I'm not sure if it'll be around forever. So once you do it, just tell me. That's the only thing that I ask. So I'm super happy to tell you about it. I really hope that you get it. But if you get your like AFM or whatever, or your AIM, just tell me, and we'll put you on the chess page as people who got their first FIDE title because of the stream. So yeah, knight to f6, castles queenside, bishop to e7, knight to e4. Basically, white's looking better here. So, white's going to castle queenside, which in the Caro-Kann is okay. Queen to a5, king b1, castles. White's up by about half a pawn. Knight takes, knight to e5, rook to d8. And then yeah, like rook to g1, g4, g5, pawn takes h6. I think this should be a good opportunity for white. To attack. But again, this is going to be like super sound play. So queen e2, c5, knight takes, and then it seems like that pawn just gets hung, right? A little bit sloppy for these IMs. Interesting. Yeah, Carlson going around with 99% accuracy. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, this mainline, very mainline Caro-Kann, bishop takes, queen takes d3, e6, bishop to f4, knight to f6, castles, bishop to e7, and yeah, I guess I would say that white's basically good here. White's going to have attacking chances on the king side. White's going to be able to expand the king side with rook to g1, g4. Black's going to probably try to play on the queen side, but I don't think this attack ever really goes anywhere. I think it's all just white aggressively attacking. cool. Yeah, so very slow, very quick win for Carlsen. This is, I guess they do call this a classic, but again, I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of not completely sold on this. Like, it seems like Black just makes a pretty key error here. Uh, Although Queen takes e6, does the engine not see Queen takes e6? So the engine thinks that f takes e6 is a big error. Rook to f8, knight takes e7, rook takes e7, and basically white's like a pawn better or so. D takes c5 probably becomes the best opportunity for white. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. Interesting for white. Interesting situation. Cool. All right. So win for white. I don't know. That was actually a little bit simple considering. I thought there was going to be more play there, but it seemed like Carlsen just sort of shut that one down. But yeah, interesting. I guess we can close out with one more final analysis of like a Blackburn game. Blackburn has just these crazy games where he plays, very. Let's look at like Blackburn Zuckertort. Like that's probably a pretty solid game. Uh, what's your what are your games? What are your games? E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop C4, bishop C5. Okay, so this is Blackburn versus Zuckertort in the Guaco piano. Blackburn goes with this early C3, knight to F6, D3. So basically, White's looking good here. White can play things like bishop to G5, knight to D2, queen to B3, and basically this will lead to a solid game for White. Yeah. Okay. Interesting, Abraham. Yeah, we can take a look at the Sicilian. If you send like a thing on lesson ideas, um, I'm just looking for your game. Where did you send it to me? Where did you send it to me? But anyways, Blackburn versus Zuckertort, bishop to E3, knight D2, knight to E7. Overall here, White's looking solid. And yeah, I guess I don't know. Good should have good play. So yeah, I mean, this could look like a modern game. I mean, this knight to f1 tactic is still in modern games today. Castling queenside and then aggressive attack on the king side. This all makes sense. This very classical game looks pretty contemporary. It's a draw. All right, whatever. Let's take a look at a few more of these Guaco piano lines. C3 followed by D3 is not the. I think basically this D3, right, is a Guaco pianissima. D4 is the center attack. H4 not no is not known as anything. B4 is bird's attack. Okay, so we know these. I mean, I don't know. I like learning these. Bird's attack is B4 out of the Guaco piano with C3. Knight to C3. D3 is the canal variation, I think, or Guaco pianissimo. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm sort of. I don't know. I'm just looking at this. I'm just looking at this Blackburn Zuckertort game and thinking like, okay, this looks like, kind of classical playing Masters now. I don't think there's any real brilliancy here, but yeah, white's just better by like a pawn. And then this tactic is kind of neat, I guess, but it was a pretty drawn game. I don't know. We got through our games early tonight. The one or two of those went by really quick. I'll confirm the games on the Discord pretty soon. And yeah, thank you all very much for being here. So I'm gonna wrap a few minutes early tonight. Next stream is at 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning, and yeah, hope to see you guys there. So yeah, basically 8 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning. There will be a tournament after the stream, as always. And yeah, look forward to seeing you there. Thank you all very much for sending your games in, and I will confirm your games and set up schedule for the next week pretty soon. I'm just exhausted for today, so I will wrap a little bit early tonight. Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for being here. Have a good one. Bye.